From kids who made a scene to tug at the jury's heartstrings, to cold-blooded psychopathic children who could not care less, these kids did the unspeakable and shocked communities. Prosecution did not go easy on them despite their age. Here are evil kids reacting to life sentences. Denali Bramer. This is probably one of the most shocking cases you have ever heard of. In 2019, Denali Bramer lured her supposed best friend, Cynthia Hoffman, on a hike where she ambushed her, unalived her, and then sent video and photo evidence of the crime over Snapchat. She sent it to a millionaire named Tyler, who had promised her $9 million if she would unalive someone and do unspeakable acts to the body, film all of it, and send it to him. Denali not only agreed to the plot, but even managed to convince two other friends, one of whom was 16, to take part in the scheme. She did all of this for a stranger she had met on Facebook. The biggest plot twist, however, came during the investigation when it was revealed that Tyler was not a real person. Darren Schillmiller, who barely had 2 pennies to rub together, had catfished Denali into committing the crime. But did this mean she was innocent? Tyler, or Darren, was a 21-year-old from Indiana who had connected with the 18-year-old Denali via Facebook. The two entered a mutually beneficial relationship where he would send her money in exchange for explicit photos. The requests and poses became more and more perverted, but the money kept coming, which is why Denali never complained. Eventually, when Tyler asked her to unalive someone and film it for him, she agreed. But why was Cece picked as a target when she was Denali's supposed best friend? According to investigators, Cece was an easy target because not only did she blindly trust Denali, but she also had a developmental disability that made her easier to subdue. Denali enlisted the help of 2 teens, including 16-year-old Caden McIntosh and an unnamed female. The 3 of them lured Cece on a hike near their hometown in Anchorage, Alaska. During the hike, they overpowered Cece, duct-taped her legs, and Caden proceeded to shoot her in the back of the head with a gun supplied by Denali. The trio sent Tyler play-by-play videos of the crime on social media. They then returned back as if nothing had happened. It was not until a day later that Cece was reported missing, and Denali's own mother contacted police, fearing that her daughter might be responsible. During courtroom proceedings, Denali tried to shift the blame to Caden, claiming that he had stolen the weapon from her and that she tried to stop him when he was attempting to unalive Cece. She later tried to shift the blame to Darren, claiming that she was used in his depraved plot. While the Indiana native was extradited to Alaska to face trial and received a 99-year term himself, Denali was not spared either. The judge noted that she had deliberately sought someone who would trust her enough. Denali tried to play the victim a few more times in court, but it did not hold up. The jury could not get over the cold, calculated nature of the crime and ultimately sentenced her to the maximum possible punishment, 99 years behind bars with no chance of ever being released. What made the case even more disturbing was how unemotional Denali appeared throughout the aftermath. Friends reported that she showed little remorse in the days following the unaliving and behaved as if nothing unusual had occurred. Investigators later uncovered messages where she discussed the crime in a disturbingly casual way, focusing more on whether she would receive payment than on the life that had been taken. Prosecutors argued this was not the act of a manipulated teenager acting under pressure, but a willing participant driven by greed, attention, and validation. During sentencing, the court emphasized that Cece had been betrayed in the worst way possible by someone she trusted completely. The judge described the crime as especially heinous, pointing to the planning, the filming, and the deliberate targeting of a vulnerable victim. In the end, Denali lost her freedom forever, while Cynthia lost her life simply for believing her friend would never hurt her. Jamarian Lawhorn. Have you ever heard of someone getting only 8 years of prison time for a first-degree offense? There were a lot of nuances in Jamarian Lawhorn's case, and his short prison term was the least of them. Most notably, Jamarian was only 12 years old when he casually walked over the playground in Kent County and stabbed 9-year-old Connor Verkaker multiple times in the back. Why did he do that? And should the judge have given him such a short prison term for such a senseless act? In 2014, 12-year-old Jamarian called 911 from a neighbor's home. He said that it was urgent. On the phone with dispatch, Jamarian casually told them that he had just unalived Connor. He told the dispatcher that he was an evil child and that he deserved the worst. The neighbor claimed that Jamarian sat perfectly calmly while he waited at his home for the police to show up. The only time he raised his voice was to alert police through the window that he was there. Jamarian told investigators that he had previously attempted to bury a kitchen knife in the playground, but ultimately decided on hiding one in his hoodie for the unaliving. He also claimed that he had taken a red pill on the morning of the unaliving. Investigators later found that it was a prescribed antidepressant. They also found Jamarian had several bruises and marks all over his body. When asked, he claimed that his mother, Anita, and stepfather, Bernard, would regularly hurt him. This opened up a concurrent case against the parents. Investigators found Jamarian and his 3 siblings living in awful conditions. Both adults were regular substance abusers, and a case had already been opened against them with CPS. Jamarian claimed that he was routinely hit by both adults, sometimes with belts and extension cords, for minor offenses. He also claimed that he had been bullied at school. While the defense tried to use this to show that he was a deeply troubled kid and deserved leniency, the prosecution disagreed. They claimed that while Jamarian came from a horrible family situation, it did not take away from the fact that he had planned the unaliving. Jamarian targeted someone from the community, and he planned it for days before executing the stabbing. Connor was a beloved kid, and the prosecution claimed that letting Jamarian go would be disrespectful to the family. Anita and Bernard were tried and convicted of child endangerment and defrauding the welfare system and received over a year's sentence for their crimes. Meanwhile, a judge ruled that Jamarian would be tried as an adult despite his age. The judge also dismissed the second-degree manslaughter conviction and upped it to a first-degree offense. That being said, Jamarian's age and remorse for the crime were taken into consideration. The judge ultimately decided that Jamarian should receive an 8-year prison term at a juvenile facility. Jamarian was emotionless throughout the trial, and many noted that he repeatedly told everyone that he deserved the worst possible punishment for what he had done. Experts claimed that while the crime might have been deliberate, Jamarian was in a daze between extreme anger and sadness for most of his young life. In 2021, Jamarian was released early after serving 6.5 years. He was 19 at the time of his release and was welcomed by Connor's paternal grandmother, who noted that everyone deserved a second chance in life. While in prison, Jamarian was said to have been an upstanding prisoner and completed his education with honors. Alexander Jackson. Friends, family, and neighbors described the Jacksons as the perfect, all-American family. Jan, Melissa, and their 2 children, Alexander and Sabrina, lived an ordinary suburban life in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Nothing about the family stuck out. They were just an unassuming family, which is why the whole community was left stunned when officers arrived to arrest Alexander. Just a few hours earlier, the family home had been the site of a reported home invasion gone wrong, but as police dug deeper, they realized that Alexander had staged the entire thing, unaliving his parents and younger sister. But why? On June 15, 2021, Alexander made a distressing call to 911, claiming that someone had broken into the home. He seemed shaken up, claiming that everyone in the home, including him, had been shot. Officers quickly arrived at a gruesome scene. Jan, Melissa, and Sabrina were all found unalived with multiple gunshot wounds. Alexander himself had been shot in the foot, and while shaken up, he was still alive and well. This was a miracle for everyone, considering the ruthlessness that seemed to have taken place at the crime scene. Alexander, a former Eagle Scout and a student at the University of Iowa, claimed that a masked intruder broke into the home, stole valuables, ransacked the home, and then shot members of the Jackson family one by one. It was a miracle that he had survived. Alexander gave police a vivid description of the shooter. He claimed that a black man wearing green shoes broke into the home, shot his father in the entryway, and then made his way into his parents' bedroom to shoot his mother, and then his sister's bedroom to shoot her. When questioned about how he was miraculously able to survive, Alexander claimed that he had wrestled the intruder, got shot in the foot, and was able to call 911 just when the intruder made a run for it. But there were already gaps in his story. Why would such a ruthless intruder leave a witness who could describe him so well? Also, the supposed weapon was the family's own semi-automatic weapon. Still, Alexander was transported to the hospital while investigators inspected the home. The first thing they checked was for signs of forced entry, and there were none. Then, on a hunch, they decided to go up to Alexander's bedroom, where they found blood splatters. They traced the splatters down the stairs into the living area. According to Alexander, he had been shot in the living room, but investigators could tell he had deliberately shot himself in the end to stage the scene as a home invasion gone wrong. The next step came relatively quickly. Investigators went to the hospital and charged Alexander with unaliving his entire family. Throughout the 2.5-year court proceedings, Alexander claimed that he was not lying. He said that he had no reason to unalive his entire family. While he admitted that his father was upset with him for failing his courses, it was nothing he would unalive the family over. This was something that stumped prosecutors too. They could not find a deliberate motive that would tie Alexander to the crime. The evidence, though, kept stacking up against him. When investigators inspected the semi-automatic used in the crime, they were able to make out a clean fingerprint that matched Alexander's. Now, he claimed that he had wrestled the weapon from the intruder's hand, but the fingerprint was so clean that it could not have been the case. Alexander's defense team argued that he maintained his innocence despite being interrogated by the police for hours on end. The whole case rested on motive, but there was none. The prosecution then shifted gears and said that there was more evidence than not to convict Alexander. The jury agreed and sentenced him to 3 life terms, without the possibility of parole in 2023. He showed no reaction when the verdict was read, and his lawyers attempted to shield him from television and still cameras in the courtroom. When deputies handcuffed him and led him out of the courtroom, he seemed to tear up. To this day, we have no idea why Alexander Jackson unalived his entire family. Was it over money? Was it over a dispute? Or did Alexander have a psychotic break? We may never know. Sofia Koval. Sofia Koval, a 14-year-old immigrant from Ukraine, calmly told investigators that the reason she unalived her 79-year-old grandmother was that she was weak. Sofia had arrived in the United States just a few months prior, separated from her mother after they escaped Ukraine during the conflict. This, according to her defense team, had a lasting impact on her mental health. However, the prosecution argued that Sofia was just a rebellious teenager who decided to do the unthinkable because she thought she could get away with it. In 2024, Sofia's father had to make a very painful decision. He had left home earlier, leaving Sofia in the care of his mother, Yevgenia Koval. When he returned, he found his mother lying bruised and unresponsive on the floor. Sofia then admitted that she had gotten into an argument with her grandmother, and it had escalated to physical violence. Sofia got the upper hand, grabbed Yevgenia's walker, and senselessly beat her with it till she was unresponsive. Her father told investigators that he had to turn his own daughter in for what she had done to his mother, a devastating thought. When investigators arrived, Sofia tried to downplay the situation, arguing that her grandmother was old anyway. This was what the prosecution reminded the judge during her trial. They claimed that Sofia was not remorseful in the slightest. If anything, she was annoyed that the US justice system was making a big deal out of it. The judge reviewed the evidence and ultimately decided that the best thing to do would be to keep Sofia at a juvenile facility for 3 years, rehabilitating her, and then eventually releasing her. Why was her sentence so short? Because at the end of her term, Sofia would be considered an offender on US soil and deported back to war-torn Ukraine. As the judge's decision was read out in court, Sofia remained emotionless. However, during the courtroom hearings, many criticized her for putting on a show. Sofia could be seen crying and being hysterical during the proceedings. She even expressed remorse for her actions, claiming that it was a temporary moment of insanity. However, the prosecution argued that Sofia's real anger that day stemmed from an earlier argument with her father, where he had decided to confiscate her phone as punishment. Whether Sofia is or is not truly remorseful for ending a life, we might never know. Colt Gray. On September 4th, 2024, Colt arrived at Appalachia High School in Winder, Georgia, carrying a rifle that he had concealed inside a poster board to make it look like a school project. According to investigators, the disguise allowed him to enter the school without raising immediate suspicion. Once inside, Colt went to a classroom and opened fire. Just hours before, Colt's mother phoned the school, alleging that something terrible was about to happen. Colt had texted both his parents that morning, apologizing but not giving much context otherwise. Colt's case was particularly unique for a few other reasons too. In 2023, so just a year prior to the shooting, Colt was tracked down by the FBI after he had made threats to commit a school shooting over Discord. Back then, Colt's parents were interviewed, and they claimed that their child was incapable of making such threats. Colt himself denied ever using Discord. Still, just a year later, and despite the investigators' warnings, Colin Gray bought his son a gun. When Colt's mother raised the alarm, school investigators went around trying to find him. It might be important to mention here that the Appalachia High School has over 2,000 students, meaning it took officials a while to find Colt. Even then, in a tragic twist, they tracked down another Colt while the perpetrator was on his way to commit the shooting. That morning, Colt had asked another teacher what would happen if there was an active shooter in the school. Later, Colt left his algebra class, pulled out a gun from his backpack, and stuffed it under a poster board. He then attempted to go back into his classroom, which could only be opened from the inside. The student noticed the gun and refused to allow Colt back in. But before they could alert others as well, Colt burst into the next room and started shooting at random. The Appalachia High School had a state-of-the-art technology that immediately sent a panic button throughout the school, but this wasn't until Colt had fired multiple rounds. Altogether, he injured 11 people, out of whom 4 did not survive, 2 students and 2 teachers. Police arrived at the school within 3 minutes and wrestled Colt to the ground, immediately taking him into custody. Now, it was up to the prosecution to show that Colt deserved a life sentence for the most senseless school shooting in Georgia's history. The defense argued that Colt came from a broken home and that there had been multiple cases of harm against both of Colt's parents, who were divorced at that point. The defense also argued that Colt had been crying for help through his antics, and that the school refused to investigate when he did not show up for almost an entire school year. The prosecution, however, claimed that while Colt's living situation and parents' prior convictions might have been tragic, it was not enough to excuse the severity of his crimes. They argued that he deliberately took a weapon to school that day, intending to inflict maximum harm. The prosecution also argued that Colt had a weird fascination with school shooters and even had a shrine in his bedroom dedicated to them. Colt now faces a possible life term in prison for the shooting and 4 unalivings. If convicted, there is little chance that he will ever be released on parole. That was something Colt probably knew about when he took the weapon to school that day. He had every chance to turn back, but did not. Carly Madison Gregg. On March 19, 2024, Ashley Smiley made plans with her 14-year-old daughter to go grocery shopping. The mother-daughter duo had been on edge lately, especially after Ashley had found large amounts of illegal substances and burner phones in her daughter's bedroom. This resulted in a heated confrontation at the Smiley residence that ended with Carly Madison Gregg having her phone confiscated and being grounded indefinitely. For a 14-year-old, this was practically life imprisonment, but Carly took her defiance a step further and unalived her own mother. Shortly after returning from school, where her mother also worked as a mathematics teacher, Carly snuck into her parents' bedroom, where she retrieved a handgun from under the mattress. She then concealed the weapon, made her way into the kitchen, and had another confrontation with her mother. According to data from the home's CCTV cameras, Carly fired multiple shots at her mother. She then texted a friend and also texted her stepfather, Heath Smiley, pretending to be Ashley. The goal was to unalive both adults and then make a run for it with the friend. Unfortunately for Carly, when Heath returned, he was able to disarm Carly. He had been shot just a few inches from his face, and despite being wounded, he overpowered Carly. Heath recalled Carly being terrified at the fact that her perfect plan had just failed. She then ran out the back door with her friend. Heath managed to call 911, and they arrived just in time to tend to his injuries and arrest Carly. The trial was a public spectacle. Carly's defense team argued that it was impossible to guarantee their client a fair trial because of all the media scrutiny. The prosecution argued that the defense team was stalling the inevitable. They knew that the severity of Carly's crimes meant that she would be tried as an adult and likely face a life sentence in prison. Throughout her courtroom appearances, Carly had little to say to the many people who showed up grieving Ashley. She avoided eye contact with Heath, and her defense team argued that Carly was not a criminal, just a misunderstood teen. The judge did not see it that way. After a short court proceeding, the judge ruled that Carly was a danger to society and charged her with 2 counts of a first-degree felony, leading to 2 life terms, one of the unaliving of her mother and the other for the attempted unaliving of her stepfather. Carly was either unamused or disinterested during the court proceedings, but when the judge read out the guilty verdict, she began to sob uncontrollably.